Welcome back, fans, to the ECHL Insider. I am your host, Garrett Hunter. Excited today to talk about the Central Division of the ECHL. But first, let's start with some ECHL news. The critical dates have been issued for the upcoming ECHL season. All teams will have their players report to training camp on October 5th, and training camp will start for the entire league on October 6th. Also, the ECHL preseason schedule has been released, so that is out and will take place mainly in the second week of October before the third week of October, the beginning of the ECHL regular season. So let's get started now with the Central Division of the ECHL. Here is how the teams finished last regular season, with the 7th place Iowa Heartlanders and the 1st place Cincinnati Cyclones. So let's get right into it. The Iowa Heartlanders, 2 seasons in the league, have not made the playoffs either season, but they definitely seem to be building this offseason. A lot of great roster moves from this team. I think they will not finish last this upcoming year. I think they have definitely made some great moves, especially in the organization, signed some big names. I think this is an improving hockey team this year in Iowa. And finishing 6th place last season, the Kalamazoo Wings. They have gone 3 regular seasons with no playoffs, and this is a hard place to be, a rebuilding year yet again in Kalamazoo. So just, build from the ground up, kind of like Norfolk, really, where you haven't made the postseason for a long time. You do re-sign some guys, get some new faces in the building, but it'll be a very hard task, I think, for the coaching staff in Kalamazoo to get this team to a playoff this year. I think it's a rebuilding year, mainly for the Kalamazoo Wings. Finishing 5th was the Wheeling Nailers. A lot of interesting things to be said about these guys. Brad Brown and how that played out last year, and all the fights with the Iowa Heartlanders, especially at the end of the season. How did that play out? Big-time rivalry with the Heartlanders. And 2 teams that didn't make the playoffs, they had just an absolute massive fight at the end of the regular season. So interesting how that rivalry will play out in the Central Division again this year. But the Wheeling Nailers also signed a lot of great guys returning to this roster, a playoff roster looking at it on paper right now for this team coming into the regular season. Now the 4 playoff teams in the Central Division. And boy, was it a playoff roller coaster in the Central Division in the Kelly Cup playoffs. We'll start with the number 4 team, the Fort Wayne Comets. Boy, were they not expected to win against the Cincinnati Cyclones in that first round. And it was just a roller coaster, 7-game series. Game 1, 3-0 lead. They blow that lead and get down in the series 2-0. Ultimately would rally to tie the series 3 games apiece, go to a Game 7 in Cincinnati. And both teams will remember this Game 7 for many years to come, as Cincinnati had a 1-0 lead late in the 3rd period. Fort Wayne thought they had scored, get to center ice, and the refs want to review it for goalie interference. Turned out goalie interference was the call. All of Fort Wayne says that's not goalie interference. Cincinnati definitely says, yes, you did interfere with Beck Worm's ability to make the save on that puck. And that was the final 1-0 in Game 7. Cincinnati would move on. And Fort Wayne they thought they had a tying goal to force a Game 7 overtime to advance in the playoffs against the number 1 seed, and they just came this short. And that's something that sticks with the fans and the players especially. So they're going to come back motivated, I think, in this next season to not finish 4th, not have to play 4 road games in a playoff series. I think this is a strong team coming back for Fort Wayne, and they want to place high in the Central Division come playoff time. And finishing number 3 was the Indy Fuel, a surprise playoff team to many people. Several seasons before that had not clinched a playoff spot, and it was mainly because of the offense. Guys like Alex Weidman playing exceptionally for Indy. Good offensive output that drove them into the postseason, and I was excited to see this team in the postseason. What could they do? Could they make a big playoff run? And that was quickly answered no, with a first round sweep dealt to them by the Toledo Walleye, and it was just so one-sided. There was almost no offense, multiple shutouts by Toledo in that series, and all that regular season offense Indy had just dissipated as soon as they made the postseason. So they just hope to kind of just forget about that, and I think look towards this next season with some hope, some optimism that they can return that offense, but that they can carry that into a big playoff run in Indy. Finishing number 2 was the Toledo Walleye, and boy, did they start a rolling when they got in the playoffs. That sweep we just talked about against the Indy Fuel. Then division finals, they sweep the Cincinnati Cyclones 4-0, and that game 4 was dominant. I could just tell going into that game 4, Toledo's got this sweep in the bag. Sure enough, they did. They sweep the Cincinnati Cyclones, and then they move on to the conference finals against the Idaho Steelheads to make a Kelly Cup final. And then it all stopped there for Toledo. 4-1, they would lose that series to a dominant Idaho Steelheads team who'd go on to the Kelly Cup finals. But man, going into that conference finals series, Toledo expected to be in the Kelly Cup finals, playing for it all this year again. And it just all fell apart. What success they had in the postseason in their division against Indy and Cincinnati, and that just did not carry over to that conference final series against the Idaho Steelheads. And the Cincinnati Cyclones, the number 1 spot, we just talked about that 7-game series that they had against the Fort Wayne Komets, pulling it off 1-0 in a game 7. And then they go on to play the Toledo Walleye. A lot of momentum on their side, and then they just got swept. I mean, we talked about that, 4-0 against the Toledo Walleye. So despite a great regular season it was for many teams in the Central Division, just the postseason did not work out for them. Really all 4 playoff teams expected to be deep in the playoffs. Cincinnati finishing number 1. Toledo going to the Kelly Cup finals the season before that. Indy had that offense. They expected to make a postseason run. And Fort Wayne, how well they played Cincinnati, expected to get past that series, and they didn't. So a lot of playoff disappointment in the Central Division, but especially the Cincinnati Cyclones, I think, coming off of that sweep in the division finals, I think they will be motivated to come back and make a high playoff run in the Central Division next year. Make sure to join us in 2 weeks. We'll talk about the Mountain Division, our final division. Then we'll get into the month of October, where the regular season will begin the 3rd week. And we are excited to bring you more off-season content and then get into the ECHL regular season.